The mail-order bride expected a gentleman. She got a rugged cowboy instead. Emily sat quietly on the train, her hands folded in her lap, staring out the window at the rolling countryside. The world she had known, the streets paved with cobblestones, the delicate perfume of flowers in city gardens, and the sound of horses' hooves on smooth roads, was slowly being replaced by open fields, dusty roads, and the wide sky stretching endlessly above. She had dreamed of this moment for months, ever since she had sent her application to the mail-order bride service. She had imagined meeting a kind, refined gentleman who would open doors for her, treat her with courtesy, and guide her into a life of comfort and elegance. But as the train whistle blew and the wheels slowed with a rhythmic screech, a knot of nerves twisted in her stomach. The small station appeared suddenly, a cluster of wooden buildings surrounded by empty land. Emily could see people moving about, carrying crates, feeding horses, and tending to the train cars. Her heart began to race, half with excitement, half with anxiety. She had practiced her polite smile, her soft voice, her gentle gestures, imagining how she would greet the man who awaited her. She had pictured a tall figure in a crisp suit, polished shoes, and neatly combed hair. Someone civilized, someone proper, someone who belonged to the world she had always known. As she stepped off the train, her eyes scanned the crowd. Her gaze fell on a man who looked nothing like the image she had carried in her mind. He was tall, strong, and rugged. His face was tanned from the sun, and small lines hinted at long years of labor. His shirt was wrinkled, and dust clung to his boots and trousers. His hands were rough and calloused, the kind of hands that had spent years gripping reins, mending fences, and working under the open sky. Yet he smiled gently, tipping his wide-brimmed hat with a small flourish that was almost shy. Emily froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. This was not the gentleman she had imagined. There was no elegance, no refinement, no polished manners that she had been expecting. She felt a small flicker of disappointment, and her heart sank slightly. She took a cautious step forward, trying to remind herself that appearances could be deceiving. Perhaps, she thought, this man had kindness and character beneath the rough exterior. "Emily?" the man asked, his voice deep but calm. "Yes, I'm Emily," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "I'm Jake," he said, offering his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was firm and strong, his hand warm. There was honesty in his eyes, a quiet openness that made her pause. She realized that, though he was not the gentleman she had envisioned, there was something in his presence that demanded attention, a quiet confidence that came from knowing oneself. The journey from the station to the ranch was long, the horse-drawn wagon bouncing along dirt roads. Emily held onto the side of the wagon, trying not to appear frightened, though every bump sent a jolt through her. Jake sat beside her, guiding the horses with ease, his posture relaxed but controlled. He didn't speak much, but his eyes occasionally flicked toward her, curious and careful. Emily found herself studying him in return, noticing the way his jaw tightened when concentrating, the small smile that appeared when a horse stumbled but quickly regained balance, the steady rhythm of his breathing that somehow calmed her own anxious heart. When they arrived at the ranch, Emily could hardly believe her eyes. The house was simple, made of wood with a wide porch that wrapped around one side. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney, mingling with the smell of hay and animals. Beyond the house, fields stretched far and wide, dotted with grazing cattle and horses. A small barn stood off to the side, and fences outlined the pastures. The ranch was alive, full of motion and sound, but it was not at all like the refined home Emily had imagined. Jake led her inside, showing her a small but comfortable room. The furniture was plain but sturdy, the bed neatly made with a patchwork quilt. A window overlooked the fields, the morning sun casting golden light across the room. Emily set down her bag, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She was safe, but her new life was beginning in a world completely different from the one she had known. "Make yourself at home," Jake said, his tone gentle. He did not hover or try to guide her too much, leaving her space to breathe and adjust. Emily nodded politely, unsure how to respond. She wanted to ask questions, to understand more about this man and this place, but the words caught in her throat. The first day passed in quiet observation. Emily watched Jake move with skill and confidence as he fed the animals, repaired broken fences, and tended to the daily chores of the ranch. She felt both awe and intimidation. The work was hard, exhausting, and entirely foreign to her. Each task required strength, precision, and patience, qualities she had never needed to practice in her previous life. She noticed the calluses on his hands, the sun-darkened skin, and the quiet way he approached every job with care. There was pride in his work, a deep connection to the land, and a respect for life that Emily could not ignore. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emily found herself on the porch, staring at the horizon. Jake joined her, carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. He handed one to her with a small nod, and she accepted it, surprised by the warmth of the cup in her hands. They sat together in silence for a moment, listening to the wind rustle through the grass and the distant lowing of cattle. "It's different from what you expected," Jake said quietly, breaking the silence. Emily nodded slowly, sipping her tea. "Yes, very different." She hesitated, then added, "But it is beautiful." Jake smiled faintly, a small twinkle in his eye. "It takes time to see it. The land, the work, it can seem harsh at first, but it has its own rhythm, its own way of giving back if you respect it." Emily considered his words. She realized that, though her life here was nothing like she had imagined, there was a certain honesty to it. There was no pretense, no false charm or polite facades. Everything was straightforward, demanding effort, patience, and courage. She felt a stirring of curiosity, a desire to understand this world and the man who thrived in it. That night, Emily lay in the small bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the creak of the porch, the low hum of the wind, the distant bark of a dog. Sleep did not come easily, as her mind replayed the day's events. She thought about Jake, about his steady hands and quiet strength. She thought about the wide fields, the animals, and the life that awaited her beyond the comforts she had always known. She realized that this journey was not just about finding a husband, but about discovering herself, her resilience, and the kind of life she was willing to embrace. As the stars appeared overhead, Emily closed her eyes and allowed herself a small smile. The gentleman she had expected had not arrived. But in his place was someone entirely unexpected, someone raw, strong, and alive in a way that intrigued her. She did not yet know what the future held, or how her feelings might change, but she felt a spark of hope, a hope that this new life, with its challenges and surprises, might be the adventure she had always longed for. By the morning, Emily awoke with a sense of determination. She would not be overwhelmed by fear or disappointment. She would face this world head-on, learn its ways, and discover if there was a place for her here. She dressed simply, took a deep breath, and stepped out to meet Jake, ready to begin the first real day of her new life. The sun rose over the fields, golden light spilling across the land, and Emily felt for the first time in a long while that she was exactly where she needed to be. Emily woke before sunrise, the faint light slipping through the window. The air smelled of hay and damp earth from the morning dew. She dressed quickly, wanting to be ready for whatever the day might bring. As she stepped outside, she saw Jake already tending to the horses. His movements were calm and sure, each step purposeful, his hands working with skill born from years of practice. Emily felt a pang of admiration mixed with nervousness. She was far from experienced in such work, and the tasks ahead seemed daunting. Jake noticed her standing at the doorway and nodded in greeting. "Good morning," he said simply. His voice was steady, confident, and carried no judgment. Emily returned the greeting, feeling the strange mix of comfort and tension that had followed her since her arrival. Her first task of the day was feeding the animals. Jake handed her a bucket of feed and guided her through the process. At first, Emily fumbled, spilling some of the feed on the ground. The animals, eager and hungry, snorted and nudged the bucket. She laughed nervously, brushing the feed off her hands. Jake chuckled softly, a low, warm sound, and helped her steady the bucket. "It's all right," he said. "They're just hungry." "You'll get used to it." Emily nodded, determined to do it correctly. As the morning passed, she began to gain confidence. She learned to toss hay so it landed evenly, to measure water for the animals, and to notice small details that made a big difference. Jake watched quietly, offering guidance only when necessary. There was patience in his teaching, a gentle way of showing her without making her feel incapable. After feeding the animals, Jake led Emily to help with the fencing. The ranch fences were old and in need of repair. Emily had never held a hammer in her life, but under Jake's watchful eye, she learned to drive nails into wood with care. The work was exhausting. Her arms ached, her fingers were sore, and sweat clung to her skin. Yet, with each fence post repaired, she felt a small surge of accomplishment. She realized that this work, though hard, gave her a sense of purpose she had never known before. By midday, the sun was high, and the ranch felt alive with sound. Birds called from the trees, cattle lowed in the fields, and the wind whispered across the plains. Emily paused for a moment, leaning on her tools, catching her breath. She looked at Jake, who was repairing the gate with practiced efficiency. He glanced at her, offering a small smile that made her heart skip. "Not bad," he said, nodding. "You're learning fast." Emily smiled shyly, feeling a small warmth in her chest. She realized that despite the roughness of the work, she was beginning to enjoy it. She liked seeing immediate results from her efforts, and she liked the way Jake respected her attempts. There was no condescension, no impatience, only encouragement. The afternoon brought new challenges. Jake had to take Emily to the fields to check on the cattle. Some of the cows had wandered near a broken fence, and it was up to them to guide the animals back safely. Emily mounted a horse for the first time. The animal was large and strong, its movements unfamiliar yet steady. Her heart pounded as she held the reins, trying to stay balanced. Jake rode beside her, offering calm instructions. "Keep your back straight. Talk to her softly. She can sense fear," he advised. Emily followed his guidance, murmuring gentle words to the horse. Slowly, the animal responded, moving in the direction she wanted. A sense of wonder and triumph filled Emily as she realized she could control something so powerful with patience and care. Jake gave her an approving nod, and she felt a spark of pride. As they worked, they began to talk more. Their conversations were simple at first, about the weather, the animals, and the land. But gradually, Emily shared small stories about her life in the city, her love of books, her walks through flower-lined streets, and the music that had comforted her. Jake listened, nodding occasionally, sharing little pieces of his own life. He spoke of his childhood on the ranch, the lessons he had learned from his father, and the responsibility he felt for the land. Emily found herself drawn to his words, realizing that his life, though different from hers, was rich and meaningful in its own way. By evening, the work was done. Emily's hands were sore, her muscles tired, but she felt a deep satisfaction. They returned to the house where a simple meal awaited. Emily helped set the table, arranging the plates and utensils with care. They ate together, the quiet of the ranch enveloping them. Conversation flowed more easily now, filled with small jokes, observations, and gentle teasing. Emily laughed more freely than she had in months, the sound blending with the creak of the wooden floor and the crackle of the fire. After dinner, Jake suggested a walk to the edge of the property. The sky was painted with the colors of sunset, orange, pink, and violet blending together. Emily marveled at the beauty, the vastness of the land stretching beyond her vision. They walked side by side, not speaking much, but the silence was comfortable. Emily felt a sense of connection growing between them, a bond formed not from refinement or elegance, but from shared experiences and mutual respect. "Do you miss the city?" Jake asked quietly. "Sometimes," Emily admitted. "But this is different. I can see why people love it here. There's honesty in the work, in the land. It's—" Jake nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It's not easy, but it's worth it. You have to learn to listen to the land, to understand it. It gives back if you respect it." Emily looked at him, noticing the determination in his eyes, the way his hands rested loosely at his sides, ready to act if needed. She realized that this man, this rugged cowboy, carried a kind of strength that was quiet yet undeniable. It was not the strength of wealth or status, but of resilience, patience, and commitment. That night, Emily returned to her room, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She wrote in her journal, recording every detail of the day, the sights, the smells, the small victories, and the growing admiration she felt for Jake. She noted how different her life had become, how unpredictable, and yet how alive it felt. She realized that her expectations of a gentleman had been based on appearances and manners, but she was learning that true character was shown in actions, in care, and in integrity. As she drifted to sleep, Emily reflected on the day's lessons. She had faced challenges she had never imagined, learned skills she had never needed, and discovered a resilience within herself. She understood that the path ahead would not be easy, but it would be meaningful. She felt a quiet anticipation for the days to come, for the possibility of friendship, understanding, and perhaps even something deeper with the man who had unexpectedly become her guide in this new life. Morning came again with the sounds of the ranch waking up, birds calling, cattle moving in the fields, and the soft thud of Jake's boots on the wooden porch. Emily rose, feeling the soreness in her muscles as a reminder of yesterday's work, but also a sense of pride. She was beginning to feel at home here, learning to navigate the unfamiliar world with courage and patience. Jake greeted her with a nod, and she returned it, ready for whatever the day might hold. Together, they faced the challenges of the ranch, each small success building trust and understanding. Emily was no longer just the city girl who had dreamed of a refined life. She was becoming someone stronger, someone who could adapt, learn, and grow. And with each passing day, she felt a deeper connection to the rugged man who had welcomed her into this unpredictable, beautiful world. By the end of the week, Emily realized she was no longer counting the hours until she could return to the city. Instead, she was looking forward to learning more, to helping, and to sharing moments with Jake. The work was hard, the days long, but the satisfaction, the laughter, and the quiet moments of understanding made every effort worthwhile. She was discovering that life, in its simplest and most honest form, could be far richer than any dream she had ever imagined. Emily had expected a gentleman, someone polished and predictable, but she was beginning to understand that the rugged cowboy beside her was teaching her lessons that no refinement could offer. There was strength in his hands, wisdom in his words, and a kindness in his actions that could not be faked or forced. And for the first time, Emily felt a genuine excitement about the life she was beginning to build, a life full of challenges, learning, and a promise of connection she had never anticipated. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the sun spilling golden light across the fields and turning the dew on the grass into tiny sparkling gems. Emily rose early, as she had been doing each day, feeling a mixture of determination and anticipation. The soreness in her muscles from previous days was fading, replaced by a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. She dressed simply, tying her hair back to keep it out of her face, and stepped outside, greeted immediately by the crisp smell of the earth and the low hum of the ranch coming to life. Jake was already at the barn, carefully checking on the horses. He glanced up and saw Emily approaching, a faint smile on his weathered face. "Morning," he said, nodding. There was no judgment in his tone, only a calm acknowledgement, and Emily felt a small warmth at his greeting. She realized that these simple moments, these unspoken exchanges, were starting to feel comforting, almost familiar. Their first task of the day was checking the northern pastures. Some of the cattle had wandered too close to the riverbank, and it was important to ensure none had gotten stuck or injured. Emily climbed onto her horse with Jake's guidance, feeling more confident than she had just a few days before. The horse moved with a steady rhythm beneath her, and she realized she could anticipate its steps, respond to its movements, and guide it with gentle commands. She felt a sense of accomplishment and pride that was entirely new to her. As they rode, Jake began to share stories of his life on the ranch. He spoke of seasons past, of storms that had swept across the plains, of neighbors helping each other in times of need. Emily listened intently, intrigued by the depth of his experience and the quiet strength required to maintain the ranch through all kinds of hardship. She began to see Jake not just as a rugged man, but as someone deeply connected to the land and its rhythms, someone who had learned patience, resilience, and responsibility through hard work. Emily tried to share more about her own past, about life in the city and the routine she had been used to. She spoke of quiet streets, libraries filled with books, and afternoons spent walking in gardens. Jake listened without judgment, nodding occasionally and asking questions that showed genuine interest. Emily felt a sense of relief. She didn't need to hide who she was, and yet she was learning to embrace a world very different from her own. When they reached the cattle near the river, Emily's confidence was tested. One of the cows had wandered too close to the edge, its hooves slipping slightly on the muddy bank. Emily's heart raced as she guided her horse closer. Jake rode beside her, speaking softly to the animal and giving instructions. Emily took a deep breath, remembering his advice to stay calm and steady. Slowly, with gentle nudges and quiet words, they guided the cow back to safer ground. Emily felt a surge of relief and pride, realizing that she had contributed meaningfully to the ranch work. The afternoon brought new lessons. Jake needed to repair a section of the fence that had been damaged by a fallen branch during a recent storm. Emily rolled up her sleeves and helped gather tools and materials. She learned to saw wood, hammer nails, and measure carefully. Each action required attention and care, and Emily felt a growing sense of competence. Jake watched her closely, offering advice only when needed, and Emily appreciated the trust he placed in her abilities. She began to understand that trust was not given lightly on a ranch. It had to be earned through effort and reliability. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Emily and Jake paused to rest. They leaned against a fence, sipping water and watching the cattle graze quietly. Emily felt a new sense of connection, not just to the land or the animals, but to Jake himself. She noticed the way he moved with ease, the way he handled challenges calmly, and the quiet determination in his eyes. There was a depth to him that went beyond the rugged exterior, a steadfastness that was both reassuring and compelling. "Do you ever regret coming here?" Emily asked quietly, unsure why the words had escaped her lips. Jake looked at her, considering the question. "Sometimes it's hard," he admitted. "The work is never ending, and the land doesn't forgive mistakes easily, but I wouldn't trade it. This is my life, and I've learned to respect it, even when it's difficult." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of understanding. She realized that life on the ranch, much like life itself, required resilience, patience, and respect for the world around her. She no longer saw Jake's ruggedness as a flaw. It was a reflection of the life he had built, the challenges he had faced, and the strength he carried within him. The days passed in a rhythm that began to feel natural. Emily rose with the sun, worked alongside Jake in the fields, and returned home in the evenings tired but fulfilled. She began to anticipate the small moments of connection, the shared glance, the quiet conversation, the laughter that came unexpectedly during a break from work. She discovered that she could enjoy hard work, the satisfaction of completing a task, and the quiet beauty of the land around her. One evening, a small storm rolled in. Dark clouds covered the sky and the wind whipped through the trees. Jake and Emily rushed to secure the animals and the fences. Emily felt fear creep into her chest as the wind howled, the rain soaked her to the bone, and the cattle scattered in panic. But she remembered Jake's calm instructions, followed his lead, and together they worked tirelessly to ensure the animals were safe. By the time the storm passed, Emily was soaked, exhausted, and exhilarated. She looked at Jake, who was drenched but smiling, and realized that shared challenges had brought them closer in ways words could not. In the quiet that followed the storm, they sat on the porch, watching the sun break through the clouds. Emily shivered slightly from the cold, and Jake offered her his jacket without a word. She accepted, feeling a warmth that went beyond the fabric. They sat in silence, watching the land glisten under the after-storm light, and Emily felt a profound sense of belonging. She had come to the ranch expecting discomfort and challenge, but she had found something more, a connection, a purpose, and a sense of home she had never known. Over the next few days, Emily began to take on more responsibilities. She learned to care for the younger animals, mend fences independently, and even drive the wagon to the nearest town for supplies. Each small achievement built her confidence, and each day she discovered more about herself. The patience she didn't know she had, the determination to learn, and the ability to adapt to circumstances far beyond her comfort zone. Jake noticed her growth, offering quiet praise and encouragement. Emily found that she enjoyed his approval, not because she sought validation, but because it reflected her own progress and effort. Their conversations grew deeper, filled with reflections on life, dreams, and fears. Emily realized that her initial disappointment in Jake's rough exterior had faded entirely. She respected him, admired his strength and patience, and felt a growing warmth in her heart that she couldn't yet define. One evening, as they worked together to prepare the barn for the coming season, Emily stumbled and nearly dropped a heavy bale of hay. Jake caught it before it fell, holding it steady with ease. Their hands brushed, and Emily felt a sudden flutter in her chest. She looked up at him, unsure how to explain the sensation, and Jake met her gaze with a quiet intensity. For a moment neither spoke, and Emily realized that something unspoken was beginning to grow between them, a feeling born of shared labor, trust, and mutual respect. That night, Emily lay in bed reflecting on the past weeks. She thought about the initial fear, the doubts, and the challenges she had faced. She realized that she had changed, grown stronger, and discovered a resilience within herself that she had never known. She thought about Jake, not just as the rugged man who had surprised her at the station, but as someone who had become a guide, a teacher, and perhaps something more. Sleep came slowly, her mind filled with memories of the day, the small triumphs, the laughter, the quiet moments of connection. Emily understood that life on the ranch would never be easy, but it had become meaningful, engaging, and unexpectedly rewarding. She no longer thought of what she had expected in a gentleman. Instead, she found herself drawn to the man who had shown her the beauty of simplicity, hard work, and honesty. By morning, Emily felt a sense of anticipation for the day ahead. She was no longer timid or hesitant. She was learning, growing, and beginning to understand the depth of the connection forming between herself and Jake. The land, the work, and the quiet moments of shared effort were shaping her in ways she could not yet fully articulate. She was discovering not just a new life, but a new self, capable of resilience, empathy, and even love. As she stepped outside, ready to face another day, Emily realized that the rugged cowboy she had once feared would never meet her expectations had become something far more important. A partner, a teacher, and perhaps in time, a man who could touch her heart in ways she had never imagined. It was growing stronger with each shared task, each story told, and each moment of trust earned. Emily smiled to herself, feeling a quiet sense of pride and hope. The journey was far from over, but she knew she was no longer just a visitor in this world. She was becoming part of it, and in doing so, discovering a connection she had never expected, a connection that promised growth, understanding, and perhaps the beginnings of love. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of wind rustling through the trees. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds, and she knew a storm was coming. She dressed quickly, tying her hair back and pulling on her boots. The air smelled damp, earthy, and alive, and Emily felt a small thrill mixed with nervousness. Life on the ranch was never predictable, and she was learning that each day brought new lessons and unexpected challenges. Jake was already in the barn, checking the animals and preparing for the day ahead. His movements were careful, deliberate, and calm, even as he sensed the storm approaching. He looked up when Emily entered, offering a small nod of greeting. "Morning," he said simply, his voice steady despite the wind picking up outside. Emily returned the greeting, feeling a quiet reassurance in his presence. The task for the day was preparing the livestock for the coming storm. Emily followed Jake as he checked fences, secured gates, and made sure each animal had food and shelter. The work was harder than ever before. The wind whipped at her hair and clothes, and the clouds threatened to release rain at any moment. Emily's hands were sore, her muscles aching, but she did not complain. She was learning to meet the demands of ranch life with determination and focus. "Be careful with the cattle near the low pastures," Jake warned. "They get scared easily when the wind picks up. Stay calm and keep your voice steady." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. She approached the herd, speaking softly and moving slowly. The animals shifted nervously, but her gentle words seemed to calm them, and she guided them to safer ground. Jake watched closely, offering encouragement when needed. Emily felt a sense of pride. She was not just helping, she was becoming skilled, capable, and respected in this world. Just as they finished securing the last of the animals, the first drops of rain fell. Soon, the wind turned fierce, and sheets of rain began to lash the fields. Emily clutched the reins of her horse, feeling fear rise as thunder rolled overhead. Jake stayed close, his presence calm and protective. Together, they moved through the storm, checking fences, corralling animals, and making sure everything was safe. Emily marveled at Jake's confidence and skill. Despite the chaos around them, he remained steady, guiding her with quiet instruction and gentle reassurance. By late afternoon, the storm began to subside, leaving the ranch wet and muddy but intact. Emily was soaked, exhausted, and exhilarated. She looked at Jake, who was also wet and tired, and realized how much they had accomplished together. The storm had tested her skills, her courage, and her ability to stay calm under pressure. More than that, it had deepened her respect and admiration for Jake. He was not just a rugged man. He was dependable, strong, and wise, in a way that could only come from experience. As they walked back to the house, Emily's boots squelching in the mud, Jake spoke quietly. "You did well today. You handled yourself better than I expected." Emily smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You taught me how to stay calm and focused." Jake shook his head, brushing rain from his hair. "You learned it yourself." "I just guided you. You're stronger than you think." The days that followed were filled with routine and small victories. Emily became more confident in her work, taking on tasks that had once seemed impossible. She fed the animals, repaired fences, and even rode out to the nearby creek to check on water levels. Each accomplishment built her sense of self, and each shared moment with Jake deepened the bond between them. But life on the ranch was not without difficulties. One morning, Emily awoke to the sound of distressed animals. The fence on the eastern pasture had broken overnight, and a group of cattle had wandered into the neighbor's land. Emily's heart raced as she ran to alert Jake. Together, they rode through the muddy fields, corralling the cattle and repairing the fence under the pressure of time and urgency. Emily felt fear, exhaustion, and determination all at once. She realized that ranch life required courage, not just in physical labor, but in facing unexpected challenges with quick thinking and teamwork. During the recovery, Emily noticed something new about Jake. He remained calm, never showing frustration, guiding her with patience and clarity. His steady presence gave her confidence and helped her trust her own abilities. By the time they had the cattle secured and the fence repaired, Emily felt a bond with Jake that was deeper than ever before. They had faced a challenge together and succeeded, each relying on the other's strengths. That evening they sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The storm had passed, leaving the world refreshed and quiet. Emily sipped a cup of tea, her hands still sore but her heart light. She glanced at Jake, noticing the quiet satisfaction in his eyes, the faint smile that appeared when he thought no one was watching. "You've changed," Jake said softly, breaking the silence. Emily looked at him, curious. "How do you mean? You're stronger, more confident?" "You handle the work, the challenges, even the unexpected moments. You've learned more in a few weeks than most people would in months." Emily felt a small surge of pride and warmth. She realized he was right. She had changed. She was no longer the timid, uncertain woman who had stepped off the train weeks ago. Resilient, capable, and confident in herself, and she felt a sense of gratitude toward Jake, not just for teaching her, but for believing in her potential. As the days continued, Emily and Jake's connection grew in small, meaningful ways. They shared quiet conversations during work, laughed at minor mishaps, and supported each other through challenges. Emily began to notice subtle gestures, the way Jake adjusted a gait for her ease, the careful way he handed her tools, the quiet concern in his eyes when she struggled with the task. Each gesture, though small, made her heart feel lighter and warmer. One afternoon, Emily was carrying a heavy bale of hay when she stumbled, nearly dropping it. Jake caught it with ease, holding it steady and giving her a reassuring smile. Their hands brushed, and Emily felt a flutter she had not expected. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze, and saw something in his eyes: respect, warmth, and perhaps something more. For a moment, words were unnecessary. The storm they had faced, the work they had done together, and the trust they had built spoke louder than anything either could say. Yet, life on the ranch still tested them. One day, a neighbor arrived with news of a problem further north. A gate had been damaged, and cattle were wandering dangerously close to a cliff. Jake immediately prepared to ride out, but Emily insisted on coming along. She wanted to prove herself, to show that she was capable and trusted. Together they rode swiftly across the fields, Emily gripping the reins tightly, her heart racing. The challenge was daunting, but she relied on her training and Jake's guidance to navigate the rough terrain and calm the frightened animals. By the time the cattle were secured, Emily was breathless, muddy, and exhilarated. She realized that each challenge on the ranch was not just about survival or work. It was about learning, growth, and trust. And each challenge brought her closer to Jake, as they relied on one another in ways that transcended words. That evening, they returned to the house, exhausted but triumphant. Emily washed up, her muscles aching but her spirit lifted. She sat on the porch with Jake, watching the sky turn soft shades of pink and orange. The wind carried the faint scent of wet earth and grass, a reminder of the storm and the day's work. "You've come a long way," Jake said quietly. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never known. "I couldn't have done it alone," she replied. "You didn't do it alone," Jake said, "but you did it. You faced the challenges, learned the work, and grew stronger every day. That's what matters." As darkness settled over the ranch, Emily reflected on the journey so far. She had expected a life of comfort and refinement, arriving with dreams of a polished gentleman to guide her. Instead, she had found rugged labor, endless challenges, and a man who demanded honesty, courage, and trust. And in return, she had discovered something far more valuable: resilience, self-confidence, and a growing affection for the man who had become her partner in every sense. She knew the journey was far from over. There would be more storms, more challenges, and moments of doubt. But Emily also knew that she was no longer the same woman who had arrived at the train station weeks ago. She had grown, learned, and begun to understand the depth of the connection forming between herself and Jake, a connection built on trust, shared experiences, and mutual respect. As Emily turned in for the night, she felt a quiet excitement for the days to come. The rugged cowboy who had initially shocked her with his rough hands and sun-weathered face had become someone she admired, respected, and perhaps even cared for in ways she had yet to fully understand. And for the first time since arriving, Emily felt a profound sense of belonging, not just on the ranch, but in the life she was beginning to build, side by side with Jake. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting a warm golden light across the fields. Emily stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the fresh air, feeling a sense of calm and purpose. She had come so far since the day she arrived, timid and unsure, expecting a life of elegance and comfort. Now, she was strong, capable, and deeply connected to the land, and to Jake. Jake was already at the barn, working quietly with the horses. He glanced up as Emily approached, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Good morning," he said simply. Emily returned the greeting, her heart light. They had shared so many challenges together, and each one had built trust, understanding, and a connection that words alone could not explain. The morning's work was routine but meaningful. Emily fed the animals, checked fences, and helped prepare supplies for the week ahead. Each task she performed now felt natural, even satisfying. She no longer feared hard work. She embraced it, seeing the results of her efforts in the healthy animals, repaired fences, and tidy barn. Each accomplishment reminded her of how much she had grown. As the day went on, Emily and Jake moved together through the ranch. There was a quiet rhythm to their work, an unspoken communication built on experience, trust, and understanding. They joked lightly when mistakes were made, laughed together at small accidents, and shared moments of quiet reflection. Emily noticed the small details in Jake's behavior. The way he adjusted her saddle when he noticed it slipping, the gentle tone of his voice when guiding the animals, the way he waited patiently for her when she struggled with a task. Each gesture filled her with warmth and a sense of belonging she had never imagined. By midday, the sun was high and the work demanding, but Emily felt energized. She had learned not just the physical labor of ranch life, but also the patience, responsibility, and careful observation it required. She had grown in confidence, skill, and understanding. She looked at Jake with new admiration, realizing that the man she had once thought rough and unrefined was actually a teacher, protector, and partner in every sense. The afternoon brought a small challenge. A young calf had wandered too close to the creek, its footing unstable. Emily noticed it first, her heart racing as she called Jake over. Together they guided the calf back to safer ground. Emily's hands shook slightly, but she remained calm, remembering all she had learned in the past weeks. Jake watched her carefully, offering advice only when needed, allowing her to act independently. When the calf was finally safe, Emily felt a rush of relief and pride. She had faced fear, acted with care, and succeeded. Jake's approving nod and small smile made her chest swell with quiet happiness. That evening, as the sun began to dip behind the hills, Emily and Jake sat on the porch with mugs of tea, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. There was a peaceful silence between them, the kind that comes from shared work, trust, and growing closeness. Emily felt a flutter in her heart as she glanced at Jake, noticing the way the sun highlighted the edges of his strong features and how calm he seemed in this world that had once felt foreign and daunting to her. "You've changed a lot since you arrived," Jake said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. Emily smiled, feeling warmth rise in her chest. "I think I've learned more about life than I expected, and about myself." Jake nodded. "You've learned to face challenges, to be strong, and to adapt." "I've seen it every day. You're not the same woman who stepped off that train." Emily's heart lifted at his words. She realized that the growth she had experienced was not just physical or practical, but emotional. She had learned resilience, patience, and courage. More than that, she had discovered the depth of her feelings for Jake. What had begun as curiosity and respect had grown into something deeper, something tender and profound. As night fell, Emily helped Jake secure the animals and tidy the barn. The ranch was quiet except for the soft sounds of animals settling in and the distant rustle of the wind through the trees. They moved together in harmony, each action familiar and comfortable. Emily felt a sense of peace she had never known in her city life, a sense of being exactly where she was meant to be. After their chores were complete, they returned to the house. Emily washed up and changed into a clean dress, simple and practical yet comfortable. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had worked hard, faced challenges, and grown stronger, and she now understood the true meaning of partnership. She glanced at Jake, who was sitting at the table, a small smile on his face. "You've done well," he said, his voice warm. "More than well. You've become part of this life and part of this land." Emily felt her heart flutter. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "You taught me, guided me, and believed in me." Jake shook his head gently. "You did it yourself. I just helped you see what you were capable of. I've watched you grow, and I've been proud every step of the way." They shared a quiet smile, the unspoken connection between them stronger than ever. Emily realized that she no longer thought of Jake in terms of the gentleman she had expected. He was more real, more honest, and far more meaningful. His strength, patience, and quiet wisdom had touched her heart, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude and affection for him. Over the next few days, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Emily worked confidently alongside Jake, learning more each day and taking pride in her contributions. She began to notice how the land, the animals, and the daily tasks connected them in ways that went beyond work. Each shared moment, each small victory, each challenge they overcame together strengthened their bond. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jake turned to Emily. "I think you've found your place here," he said softly. Emily nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I think I have. I feel like I belong." Jake smiled, reaching out to gently take her hand. Emily felt a thrill at the contact, a mix of excitement, comfort, and growing affection. They sat together, hand in hand, watching the sky deepen into shades of purple and gold, feeling a quiet contentment. As the weeks passed, Emily and Jake continued to grow closer. Their conversations became more personal, filled with hopes, fears, and dreams for the future. Emily found herself confiding in Jake in ways she had never shared with anyone else. He listened with patience, understanding, and care, offering support without judgment. She realized that love, she thought, was not about appearances or expectations. It was about trust, respect, shared experiences, and the quiet moments of connection that built something real and lasting. One evening, under a sky full of stars, Emily and Jake walked to the edge of the fields. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of grass and earth. They paused, looking out over the vast expanse of land that had become their shared world. "I never imagined my life would be like this," Emily admitted softly. "I expected comfort, elegance, a gentleman. But I found something more. I found strength, connection, and... you." Jake turned to her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you. Someone willing to learn, to try, to grow. You've surprised me, Emily. And you've become very important to me." Emily felt her heart swell. The bond they had built over weeks of work, challenges, laughter, and quiet moments had grown into something undeniable. She realized that she had fallen in love with Jake, not the rough cowboy she had first met, but the strong, kind, patient man who had taught her the meaning of life, partnership, and trust. They stood together in silence, feeling the connection between them. Emily reached out, resting her head on Jake's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, holding her close, and she felt a sense of safety, belonging, and love unlike anything she had ever known. In the weeks that followed, Emily continued to grow in her skills, confidence, and understanding of ranch life. She worked alongside Jake every day, sharing responsibilities, challenges, and quiet moments of companionship. Their bond deepened with each shared experience, each act of trust, and each moment of laughter. By the end of the season, Emily knew that she had found her place, not in the life she had imagined, but in the life she had built through effort, courage, and connection. She no longer thought of what she had expected in a gentleman. She had found something far more meaningful: love, respect, partnership, and a sense of belonging with the man who had become her home. One bright morning, as the sun rose over the fields, Emily and Jake walked together through the pastures. The air was filled with the sounds of animals, birds, and the gentle rustling of the wind. Emily looked at Jake, her heart full, and realized that this rugged cowboy, once so different from her expectations, was exactly what she had been searching for all along. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. Life on the ranch was hard, unpredictable, and challenging, but it was real, meaningful, and full of love. Emily had arrived expecting a gentleman, but she had found something far better: a partner, a friend, and a man who had earned her trust, respect, and heart. Together, they faced the future with courage, hope, and a bond that nothing could break. And as they stood there, hand in hand, looking out over the land they had come to love, Emily knew that she had finally found the life she had been seeking, not in dreams or expectations, but in reality, in love, and in the rugged, honest world she now called home.